Joining us right now is Dan Rust, author of the book Workplace Poker. Welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here.
And you talk in the book about the bosshole, which is a horrible boss. Everybody's had to deal with such types. How would you define that?
Well, before I address that, I'm still trying to get my head around the operation game where you actually get electrocuted. I'm actually thinking I could like that. Well, that would be a great game. I don't know if you could get away with selling it.
I was thinking minor shocks. I wasn't thinking like the whole Texas, Florida thing, like the electric chair.
Well, no, the shocks should build up over time, so that if you're really a bad surgeon, it should get worse and worse and worse until you can't take it anymore. So, I guess that's neither here nor there. But I can't get it out of my head.
Yeah, well, they should have had that at the Republican debates. Every time they said something stupid, you had a mild shock. It would have been like aversion therapy to get rid of the stupid. No offense if you voted for Donald Trump.
Then the term bosshole, I guess it.
Speaking of bossholes, Donald Trump. But go ahead, yeah.
Well, and we've all dealt with these abrasive, annoying, oftentimes incompetent bosses in the workplace.
Passive-aggressive is probably even worse.
Absolutely. Although, to be clear, when I think of the term bosshole, I'm thinking of people who are just really bad bosses and really hard on their folks. But if it goes further than that, where you've actually got like evildoers or criminals, that's a whole different set of rules. So as we talk about how to survive in the modern workplace and deal with less than perfect bosses, one of the things I always try to make clear is, even though I spend a lot of time talking about how to work well with less than competent people, if you have one of those situations where you've got someone who's actually, doing, criminal violations, that's just a different thing. So I'm not talking about how to, get along with someone who's actually perpetrating evil.
Yeah, so the Bernie Madoff job, that one. Well, the workplace is so boring these days. I think that's one of the worst parts of the workplace. It's not my workplace and not yours. You're writing cool books, but I mean, I've been to workplaces where the assignments are just unbelievable. That's why a lot of people are taking a lot of this ADD medicine, because they're having to do bean count to the point where they're just like pulling their hair out.
Well, I think one of the reasons the workplace seems so boring to so many people is the actual work itself isn't necessarily all that exciting, whether you're pushing paper or pushing emails or pushing digits or whatever you're doing.
Or pushing your boss off the ledge. But in fact, most of us, we get so busy doing the work on the surface that we stop paying attention to what's going on under the surface. And one of the things that I found is, once you become kind of a corporate anthropologist, where you really do study the human dynamics where you're working, whether you're a barista at Starbucks or a cashier someplace or wherever you might happen to be, human beings are incredibly interesting, incredibly flawed. There's so much going on under the surface that if you're just looking for something just to keep your mind busy while you do the mundane drudgery work, becoming a corporate anthropologist and a student of human dynamics, man, it can make the work environment much more interesting and fascinating. And then, of course, also makes it better for you or easier for you to ultimately, succeed or do well in your career. A bad type of boss is one who takes advantage of electronic communications too much. They email you at all hours. They're texting you. They're calling you. You can't get away from work. I think that's one of the modern problems of some bosses today, that they don't have I don't guess maybe some of them don't have lives. And what they do is they try to monopolize yours to make up for their own nothingness in life or whatever it may be. They just think they own you. They can reach you 24 hours a day in the modern workplace.
Well, and I will share with you one strategy that I've had someone share with me that worked for them. But I have to caution you. Any of these ideas, you have to take them with a grain of salt and focus on your own situation, because you can take someone's idea that sounds great over the radio or sounds good when someone else tells it to you over a couple of beers, and then you try it and you're like a 6-year-old with a shotgun. You pulled the trigger and created a huge amount of damage. But one great
idea that I heard was a lady was talking to me about a boss who was doing exactly what you're describing, and she said everyone in the office was frustrated by this behavior because whenever he had an idea, a request, just something he was wondering about, noodling on, it could be over the weekend, late at night, he would just fire off an email. I mean, the worst day of their lives was the day someone gave him a smartphone when he could finally begin doing this all the time. And a few people talked to him about it, did kind of the standard thing that you're told to do, and really nothing ever changed his behavior. And she decided to turn it back on him. And she said she created a strategy where she found reasons to begin emailing him late at night and on weekends with very specific things that he really needed to or should respond to, or things that were late that he needed to do something about. And she began giving him a dose of his own medicine, but doing it in a very positive way, not in a snide way where it was obvious she was trying to do a thing. And she said that was finally the little rap on the head that got his attention, where he realized how off-putting it is when suddenly he's doing his thing and he's at a ball game and his phone starts dinging because someone needs something or has lost something or forgot something. Now, I wouldn't say that again, that's not going to work in every situation, but because when you've got a boss like that who's basically willing to interrupt your weekend for his or her whim, whatever it might be, that's usually a reflection of lots of other things that they're doing in the workplace as well.
Yeah. Do you think most bosses are decent, or do you think most of them veer toward the boss hole category?
Oh, I think the majority of them are decent, flawed people, just like the rest of us. They are decent. They and even you have sort of your borderline boss holes who they're not necessarily great at what they do, but they think they are, and they're not trying to be abrasive. And when you, in a positive way, address whatever the behavior might be, they may actually make an effort to course correct. Really, the majority, easily 70-80% of the bosses are decent people, but the other 20% seem to get around a lot. And we get lots of exposure to them for some reason, and they stay with you. I mean, I still remember the worst boss of my life. I mean, that guy, there are still days where I get the willies if I think too much about what it was like working in I think sometimes
name him on radio. So let's shame him for all of us. I kid you, because I don't. You'll get sued. But it would be kind of fun.
Marty.
Oh.
Marty E. There, that's as far as I'll go.
What industry?
Stockbroker.
Okay, all right, Marty E. Don't anybody, if you're at the stockbroker right now and you look at the desk and you look at the nameplate and you see Marty, go look at the last name and walk out.
Looks like we got Marty on the line to talk here.
Yeah.
So,
well, and so I think that one of the challenges that people have with the really, really tough bosses is trying to figure out, well, do I quit? Do I stay? What options do I have? And particularly in today's economy, if you've got a relatively decent paying job, those are tough to come by. I mean, no matter what the economic statistics are that they tout, and every administration does it, where it seems like for all of my adult life, whenever the economic numbers come out, unless there's something really hugely dramatic, they find a way to spin everything in a positive way. But in reality, every day I'm talking to people who have well-paying white-collar jobs, especially, and they're tough. I mean, if they get unemployed, it's hard to replace their level of income. So people do feel trapped, and oftentimes I think the boss holes seem to gravitate to these well-paying environments because, of course, that's where they have the power. I mean, if you're a shift manager at a Subway sandwich shop, you can't be too much of a jerk because folks are going to quit and go, down the street and work somewhere else relatively easily.
Right.
But if you are paying people really well and on some level, you've got them locked in, then over time, this type of person begins to take advantage of that power, and then that's when you get the true boss hole effect.
And you have seen a lot of this in the tech industry. There was a big front page series in the New York Times about Amazon.com. And they pay well, but they burn people out very quickly, and a lot of people cry at their desks. So you're right about that. But the tech industry seems to be one that it's kind of weird. They try to make you think that it's a situation where it's a cool atmosphere. Like they'll put a ping pong table in there, but if you actually use the ping pong table, lazy's playing ping pong.
Or take more than your share of free M&Ms. Someone notices. There's no doubt about it.
Okay, so I should put some back.
Yeah.
Good to know.
But Amazon's a great example because there is such a what I've been told by people who've worked there is they were so excited their first day. The idea of I'm going to work for this hugely influential company. All of my friends and family, when you say Amazon, we all know what Amazon is. So there's this connection that we make to our jobs it's not real. It's this emotional connection where we feel better because we're working for a company that everyone knows and seems to have a good reputation. But then once you start working there, this over focus on efficiency and productivity and drive. And I mean, I'm all for productivity, but at a certain point, you are dealing with human beings who have lives, and you can't just push them. And I've read the same stories you have of people, sitting at their desk crying because they've pushed it as hard themselves as far as they can, and it's still not enough. And that environment, even when it got exposure in the press, you probably remember how much Amazon tried to push back and say, no, that's not us, that's not our values, that's not who we are. But the reality is, you are who you are. You aren't what your mission statement says. You aren't what your value statement says. But a business is what it actually is. And in environments like that, if you, as the individual employee, if you aren't really clear regarding what you are willing to do and why you're doing it, you can easily be, crushed by a culture like that. So what I tell people is there are times. Mm-hmm. There are times where it makes absolute sense to work for a bosshole or work in a tough environment, but you need to be crystal clear about what your reasons are. I had a lady who worked at an architectural firm. She was a young designer, young architect, and the guy that she worked for who owned the firm, he had a horrible reputation, not in any sort of sexual harassment way, but just a horrible reputation for the way he treated people in general. He was an equal opportunity emotional abuser, so to speak, and yet his firm had a great reputation for design, had a great reputation amongst clients. They had a beautiful clientele, and she knew going in that she wanted exposure to that environment. She wanted exposure to those clients. She wanted that experience. She was getting something out of it, and she said she knew it was going to be hell in many ways. She, in the end, said she didn't know how bad it was going to be, but she did it for a very conscious reason. And then when it came time for her to move on, even though she had a lock-solid non-compete agreement where she couldn't take away any of the firm's clients, mm-hmm. She ended up playing the chess game. You were talking about chess earlier. Whether you use chess or poker as the metaphor, she really thought through her transition very carefully so that by the time she was ready to leave, she'd gotten what she wanted to get out of the experience. She also had a couple of key client relationships that she knew she could bring along with her in a way that didn't violate her non-compete agreement. But it was a very thoughtful strategy going in. And she still today, while she acknowledges he is an absolute ass to work for, she'll say it was the best experience of her work life because she got so much out of it.
That's not uncommon. I mean, I share that the most unpleasant job I've ever had in Washington, an intellectual sweatshop, so to speak. I learned more in that 1 year, and you're going through it. It's miserable, but when you leave, you've gained a lot of knowledge. It's almost like boot camp in a way.
Yeah. If you can keep your head, if you know why you're doing it. Unfortunately, some people end up, over time, that environment starts to normalize for them,
and they actually think that's the way it's supposed to be, and they don't leave. They end up being, it's like the Stockholm syndrome. They end up in a strange way liking the abuser and liking the business that has this hold on them. So you do have to be very careful about why you're doing it, and then at a certain point when it's no longer working for you, then you consciously move on.
I think you have to do it in short stints, get what you need and leave, or you end up going insane. Let's go to the phones right now. Anybody have a boss hole story? 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. Damon, welcome to the show.
Hey, Wayne, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Oh, hanging in there. And my boss hole story isn't a bad one, but it was just, I was laughing about, the little things you can do to make people realize, especially with media technology the way it is. I had, when I was in the Navy, my master chief used to love to do read receipts all the time, and he would just like shotgun emails out to like all the chief's mess. And so I would be sitting there, and he's like, you'd click on it, and like read receipt request, and I'm like, oh my goodness gracious, and I'm getting like 30 emails a day, none of them having anything to do with what the heck we're doing. Mm-hmm. So I would save them all up, and at the end of the month, hit yes to all as I was deleting them. And he would get like 900 things flooding his email back. But that was, because I really haven't had too many bad experiences with boss. I mean, bosses, things were a little bit different when I was in Afghanistan, but because I was contracting there. But that was my one little funny thing, when your guest was talking about, emailing the boss back on the weekends. But that,
what I love about that is, sometimes you do need those just little things to keep yourself sane, and to know that it's not just all raining down on you all of the time. And as much as it is a little thing, it sounds like a great example of what kept you mentally sane in your environment.
Yeah, I'm less strategic and more old school. I just slash tires and key cars. No, I'm kidding. So another situation where you have a problem at work with bosses can take advantage is they pit the workers against each other. And Washington, when I lived there, was notorious for this. What they would do is they would force people to work out, to try to outwork each other. So nobody would want to be the first person to leave the office. So everybody would work ridiculous hours because they didn't want to be seen as lazy. So there were people who work at 16 hours a day because nobody wants to leave first. And the bosses encourage this subtly. So that's another strategy. Have you seen that?
Well, and what's so crazy about that? I think if we knew what was actually happening in those last 2 or 3 hours, where everyone's just trying to figure out a way to stay, but no one's doing any actual work. Maybe a little bit, but not much. It's total craziness. One of the hardest things I think it is for people to do is to step back from your environment and step back from your boss emotionally and study it almost the way. Do you remember Jane Goodall in the 70s and 80s?
Yeah, with the monkeys.
Yeah. And if you step back...
Not the band, but the actual, apes.
Exactly. And when she studied apes, she would sit with them or sit in the environment, but she was careful, at least at first, not to interact with them. She just observed, and in her journals, she took careful notes about everything that she observed, and she observed some great behavior and some horrendous behavior. I mean, ape murder, ape rape, ape killing of babies. So she observed some awful things as well as positive things, and everything she just noted objectively. And what I tell people in a workplace like that where it's kind of crazy, there's weird stuff going on, if you can step back and just observe, take the emotion out of it for a week or two, where you almost become Jane Goodall in that environment. And just, even if it is just purely, as an experiment, I'm going to stay late, and I'm going to see how late people are willing to stay. I'm going to work it out with my family so that they don't expect me home before 10 p.m. tonight. And I've got something I'm going to do. Maybe I'm going to read a book, or I'm going to do something. But I'm just going to see how far will people push this, almost as your own personal experiment in observing the apes in the work environment. And when people do things that are weird, when people do things that are mean or abusive, rather than getting sucked into the emotion of it, if you can for a week or two, just step back and say, I'm just studying. I'm just observing. I'm observing the abrasive boss. I'm observing who actually is under his thumb, who has figured out how to work with him or around her. And there's something about the depersonalization where if you begin to observe, you can sometimes see a way through to actually work better with that person. And sometimes, and not always, I'm just saying sometimes you start to see things with a clearer light of day. And then other times you realize, wow, this is screwed up, and it's just time to move on. But I think that depersonalization really helps people get a clearer view of what's really going on. Otherwise, because when you're angry, you can't read people well. When you're downtrodden, when you're frustrated, even positive emotions. If you're too impressed by someone, you can't read them well. If you're turned on or attracted to someone, you can't really read them well, which is a whole different book, I'm sure. But the point is, by stepping back and being Jane Goodall in the work environment for a brief period of time, I think it gives you a much better sense of how you might be able to play the game a little better.
Yeah, and do you think, though, that these boss holes are effective? I mean, maybe that's why they're there. Or do you think the whole Donald Trump-esque, you're fired, or this perception that they have to be tough, is it actually effective, or do you think it backfires more often?
Well, here's the part of the challenge is sometimes it works. And I hate to say it, but that's their reality. And that doesn't make it right. It doesn't mean I would want to work for that kind of person ever again. But sometimes it works. And some people, it is strange how, like when I would watch the Apprentice, I was amazed that people would put themselves through that. I mean, who in their right mind would go on national television and put yourself in that kind of environment where you're going to be, publicly fired and humiliated? But it works for some people and for some reasons. So,
to quote Gore Vidal, never turn down sex or a chance to be on television.
Yeah. I guess that's true.
Yeah,
I guess that's true.
You're on TV, put up with anything. So anyway, I appreciate you being on the show. Dan Rust, author of the book Workplace Poker, and I'll give you a couple seconds just to describe it to people so they can go out and get it.
The essential premise of the book is that if you think that hard work and talent and ambition are going to get you what you want out of your career, while those are important, that's only half of the game. You really have to get good at playing the game under the game. And that's what we've been talking about, the human dynamics. And so the whole book is all about recognizing what's really going on with yourself and with others under the surface and learning to play that game equally well as you play the game of hard work and talent.
And if that doesn't work, offer sex or maybe pizza for the office. One of the two.
Pizza. Yes, pizza.
Yeah, pizza. Everyone loves pizza. Thanks. I appreciate you being on today. Dan Rust, author of the book Workplace Poker.
Thanks so much, Wayne.
And enjoyed the conversation. This is Wayne Besen on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT, where facts matter. I'll be back in a flash.